Linda, we'll just give it a couple minutes, let the count go up a little bit.
Sounds great.
Just give it 1 or 2 more minutes. Still going up. Friday morning, people are waking up. Okay, well, it's still going up a little bit, Linda, but I think we should probably get started for sake of time. Is that okay?
Yes, absolutely. I'm ready if you are.
Okay, all right. Well, good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us for part 4 and the final installment of SARC's Ignite Speaker Series, brought to you by BHHS Legacy Foundation. To best manage today's event, all participants are automatically placed on mute. The chat function, as you can see, is available though, so we'll monitor that. All right, let's get started. Thanks again for joining us, and I'd like to introduce Dr. Linda LeBlanc. Dr. LeBlanc is president and founder of LeBlanc Behavior Consulting. Through her practice, she provides a range of services from public speaking and training activities to executing coaching and development of organizational systems for research and clinical oversight. She previously served as professor at Claremont McKenna College, Western Michigan University, and Auburn University, and as the executive director of Trumpet Behavioral. Dr. LeBlanc is the editor-in-chief of the Journal of Applied Behavior Analysis. She is a fellow of ABAI and is the 2016 recipient of the APA Nathan H. Azrin Award for Distinguished Contribution in Applied Behavior Analysis. And without further ado, I'd like to give the floor to today's speaker, Dr. LeBlanc. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, if someone could just chat, how's the audio? Can you hear me well? Good. All right. Well, I am excited to be here, and I was delighted to be able to respond to this when my dear friend Paige Rates reached out to me about this opportunity, and she indicated she was excited about the topic, and I'm always excited about the topic. Before I get started, I want to give a special acknowledgement to my colleague, Dr. Bridget Taylor. You probably know who she is because she's a rock star in our field, but if you don't, this is her picture up on the screen rather than mine. You can see my face, but she and I really have put a lot of time and effort into collaborating in this topic, and I'll talk to you about a couple of the articles that we've written. We have also been collaborating to create a course in a master's program at Florida Tech on teaching master's students how to provide compassionate care and how to build therapeutic relationships. And next up in our dynamic duo efforts is we're going to create a multi-part CEU so that if organizations or even graduate programs were to want to send their folks to get training in these skills from the two of us, they'll be able to do that through Florida Tech or ABA Technologies. So it has been a real pleasure to work with her in this area. She and I are both, in addition to being board certified behavior analysts, we are both licensed psychologists. And a lot of the content that we are that you'll be experiencing today really is related to things that we learned in graduate school and that we learned in our training, and that we want to see be more robustly available for those newly minted behavior analysts. So here's what we'll be talking about today. First, we'll talk about compassionate care and the effects on both outcomes and experiences of people who experience it. And we'll also talk about compassionate care in ABA services. We'll talk about basic skills for enhancing therapeutic relationships. And then we'll talk about supervising others to develop these skills. So let's begin with some healthcare findings about patient or client experiences. When you are in a healthcare setting and your physician assistant, nurses, etc., when their interpersonal behavior is characteristic of what is called compassionate care, that is, they are clearly behaving in an empathetic way with kindness, they are listening, that actually produces a positive effect on the patient who is having that experience. And it actually produces several positive effects. There have been studies that show when physicians pay attention to these interpersonal behaviors, the patients themselves tend to be less anxious, and they also tend to communicate more effectively and tell that physician about some signs, symptoms, and experiences that might otherwise never be reported. And they also tend to report higher satisfaction. And this has actually been shown across both primary care, oncology, which is cancer care, and diabetes. And in addition to being less anxious, liking the experience better, there also tend to be improved health outcomes. So in a series of studies, or actually just in several somewhat unrelated studies, quality of that relationship between the provider and the patient has been associated with improved adherence to treatment. And although these findings are from healthcare, we also know that adherence to treatment, that is families being able to fully implement and consistently implement intervention, is something that everyone would benefit from being improved. And so part of your strategies for helping families be able to more effectively adhere to treatment can be rooted in that quality of the relationship. If they're more comfortable talking to you about their barriers, you're going to be more effective at helping them overcome those barriers. So in addition to that improved adherence to treatment, it leads to exactly what you would expect. The health outcomes themselves are also improved. We know that. So this is a complicated relationship where that quality of the relationship improves adherence, which improves health outcomes, and also there's an improved patient experience. This has been shown so robustly that it's now the case that every medical school in North America has a communications course where skills like active listening, empathetic responding are taught in the course. Bedside manner is no longer just maybe you'll get lucky and they'll have it. In fact, it's now required. Okay, so what about our backyard? Are we doing this? What about ABA treatment services for individuals with autism spectrum disorders? these two quotes, anytime you see a green box like this, it means that it is a quote from LeBlanc, Sellers, and a Lie, 2020. This is a book on supervising behavior analysts. And so anytime you see green, LeBlanc et al. 2020 is where it came from. So in our field, we have to be better at embracing these findings and what we know about human interactions. And what we know is this: when you are more personable, you are likely to be more effective, no matter what other skills you have. And when you're not personable, you risk losing career opportunities, and you risk losing the opportunity to influence other people and to collaborate with others. And I don't think there's anybody in this field that doesn't care about the opportunity to influence other people and improve lives. It's hard. It's a challenging job, and you wouldn't do it if you did not care about that opportunity to do good in the world. So these kinds of skills, like communication skills, are critically important. I view it as the quality of your communication therapeutic relationship skills sets a ceiling on what you should hope to achieve. No matter what other skills you have, you're only going to go so far if you do not have these skills. And a big part of that is communication. And someone who is an effective communicator knows when to initiate the communication. They also know the impact that they hope to have on the recipient or the listener. And that impact is almost always plural. I not only want to tell you something, I want to create a certain impression, usually that I care, that I'm listening to you, that I value you. Those are impacts. And if you're not paying attention to them, you may communicate in a way that is not likely to help you achieve that desired impact. And, that notion of like reading the person that you are interacting with in order to determine if you've really had the impact that you need to have, that you wanted to have. These kinds of skills are critical to success in our field. And I view it as they're directly related to the content of our field. This is, again, it's not just a nice to have if you happen to be particularly socially savvy. When you look, this is the 4th edition task list. 5th edition has just as many of these, but look at this. When all of these items explaining behavioral concepts using non-technical language, that's about communicating and communicating in a way that matters to the listener, collaborating with others who support or provide services to clients. That is a professional relationship skill. Working with clients and families to select intervention strategies collaboratively and to design the strategies based on the resources in the environment and the social validity of the intervention. All of that speaks to our ability to connect and communicate with families. So I would suggest that at least all of these things in our task list make this skill set core to behavior analysis, not ancillary. Here are some examples of ways that I have not only over the years tried to teach my graduate students, but have tried to put resources in the field that are useful for collaborative treatment planning. And both of these articles give you a way, assuming you've done your good job as a behavior analyst and identified the function of problem behavior, that's your technical skill. Okay, great job. Now you need to develop an intervention that's actually going to be implemented and is likely to be successful. And one of the best ways to do that is to collaborate with the people who will actually implement it long term, and to talk with them about what their fears and barriers and concerns and priorities are. So each of these models propose a series of questions, and the answers lead you to different potential options. Then there's a table that has all of your options that you can review collaboratively and do a pro-con analysis, and then select collaboratively, what should we do as that treatment? So the relationship is key. It matters so much more than you think. That collaborative therapeutic relationship that you build with a family is critical to the success of your intervention. And it has effects on multiple of these outcomes. That is, yes, patient outcomes. We very much always care about patient outcomes, which is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 to the right. But it enhances the satisfaction of the family and their adherence. It also contributes to a perception of transparency in the relationship and the pursuit of services. And all of those then also contribute to those patient outcomes. And guess what? It actually matters to the provider as well, because when therapeutic relationship skills are stronger, you see people are less likely to have stressors associated with therapeutic relationship. And you're going to see that positive effect, lowering burnout and increasing career longevity. This is a study that I like quite a bit from Chadwell et al. And the last author is Keith Allen. And he's been publishing for years on relationships with families, parent training, and thinking about barriers to adherence and supports for adherence in a behavioral way. Now, this was a little bit more translational study. They did a delay discounting study with families, and what they were kind of pitting against each other was success of treatment. What would you choose if you knew a treatment was 10% successful, 20%, 30%, 40%, all the way up to 70%, versus therapist characteristics of being cold and distant versus warm and accepting? Here's the thing. Parents were willing to tolerate a treatment with significantly less empirical support in favor of therapeutic relationship variables. So that is, at the 10% treatment effectiveness, what you'll see is, well, most people would not pick that. And they would go for, they would choose based on that therapist characteristic. And at the very high success point, okay, most people would definitely pick the effective one. But in the middle, those interpersonal styles and relationship effectiveness matter a lot more than you think. And people would choose a less effective treatment for a more skilled interpersonally clinician. So think about this. You know, I think we often have this idea that, you know, families experience so many stressors, and we want to counterbalance that with ABA services. That, you know, we are going to be what evens the scales. However, what you need to keep in mind is that that's actually a question mark as to whether ABA services becomes the scale balancer or lands right smack on top of that existing family stress, financial strain, grief, worries about the future. you know, it is the case that if we don't focus on building strong therapeutic relationships, families might choose less effective treatments because the providers have better skills in this area. It could also be the case that families disengage from services because it's stressful to them, or they have aversive interactions with their clinicians. That means we've squandered an opportunity to address issues that are important to our family. And you know, families may still be receiving services, but be disengaged from the services. So don't be fooled just because there are treatment sessions occurring that the family's fully engaged. So we run risks if we don't build these relationships. It's not just that we want to get the benefits of really good skills in these areas. We want to avoid the risks associated with not paying enough attention to this. So let me tell you a little bit about some of our research about how we're doing on building these kinds of relationships with families and establishing these kinds of skills. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about two studies that Bridget and I published together with our colleagues Melissa Nossick and Nancy Marchese. And one of them really was, I would say, a paper to get the party started, to get the discussion started about the importance of compassionate care and the things, you know, likely the skills we should be paying attention to, and a curriculum. And then the follow-up article on the right is about the extent to which people are currently being trained in that area. So let's focus on this first one about compassionate care. The paper was certainly about compassionate care, but we also did a survey of parents of children with autism. And admittedly, we did not get thousands and thousands of responses, but we did get some responses. And these parents were surveyed independent from their providers. So there could be no perceived negative impact. And what we did was we surveyed those parents about the behaviors that they had encountered in their relationship with their provider, and sometimes with various providers, in the areas of compassion and empathy, listening and collaboration, and then a variety of behaviors that might contribute to problems. So let's focus first on empathy and compassion. Of these items, there's some good news. There's some stuff we were great at, and where families consistently said, yes, this absolutely, I encountered this occurred regularly. Acknowledging and celebrating the child's accomplishments, demonstrating care about the child, acknowledging and appreciating the child's strengths. However, there were some other things that were scored low. So that is, on average, families were not comfortable saying, yes, I agree with this. And that is regularly checking in with the parent about how the parent is doing. Acknowledging their own mistakes if they make them. Reassuring parents that things will get better. That is, interactions focused on hope, reestablishing and maintaining hope, and having an understanding of what it's like for parents. These are the ones that were scored the lowest. And if you look at this pattern, it makes sense that a lot of this pattern comes from the fact that I think behavior analysts are often trained to think about the client as the child with autism rather than the family. And they are just assuming there'll be positive impact on the family if they change behaviors of the child. It is a very different perspective to actually view it as your client is this family, and that you are improving the lives of all of these individuals. So you'd better know something about the lives of all of these individuals. Well, let's move on to listening and collaboration. The ones that were scored as yes, we're doing great on this, were listening to concerns during that first meeting. We tend to be good in the assessment. It's on our radar. Protecting confidentiality, that's good news. Paying attention to ethics, considering parent input, collaborating on goals, and these are all wonderful things to see high scores on. However, there were some other items in this area where we didn't score quite so well. Things like asking if the parent is happy with how things are going and compromising when there's a disagreement, clarifying expectations of both parties, and regularly communicating changes in programs. And again, I think that part of this is rooted in if you don't have a perspective that the family is your client, you're not necessarily paying much attention to how the family is perceiving the services as going. And you may be, if you're not viewing your efforts with this family as a collaboration rather than your treatment, you're not likely to view it as your job to compromise or apologize or what have you. So these are the things that we might not do as well at, and there could be multiple reasons, including the job of a behavior analyst is a very, very busy one with multiple clients and lots of communication. It's long, hard hours. And these can be the things that don't necessarily hit our radar. And those long, hard hours, that busy schedule, that never-ending to-do list can sometimes contribute to behaviors that actively interfere with the relationship. For example, some of the things that families endorsed as frequently occurring was that the behavior analyst has their own agenda rather than moving towards that family's wellness agenda. That the behavior analyst might underestimate their child, that the behavior analyst focuses too much on challenging behavior, doesn't communicate. And in fact, here is a quote from one survey respondent. And we probably all know someone, when. I've been doing this for 30 years, and I've made this mistake. I know it. And I've also had to facilitate when others have made this mistake. But what the parent says is, my son's first therapist was a young woman with no kids. She didn't understand our need to pick our battles. And she thought it was important that my son learn to wear t-shirts that didn't have a train on them. We told her that wasn't the most important issue to us, that it made him happy, and that we wanted to focus on other things. But more than once, she tried to force the issue. When these kinds of things came up and we disagreed, she was very defensive and acted like she had all the answers. I had already raised another child into adulthood, and I wasn't interested in this young single woman without kids taking that stance with me. We moved on to therapists that have been much more collaborative. So there are a few things here. The first is, somehow this BCBA got into a power struggle with a family and lost sight of the fact that we are, as BCBAs, as providers, we are temporary and we are discretionary. Those parents will always be those parents. They will always be making the decision. And my guess is what this BCBA felt like, that what was perhaps important, I hope, wasn't whether a t-shirt has a train on it, because just teach him to wear a sweater over it, for heaven's sake, but that helping families understand that you can, make decisions and set limits if it's something that you care about. then that's really what's important, not necessarily a train or no train. But once you go down this path of it's a battle, coercion is how am I going to convince you that I'm right? I feel attacked if you disagree with me. All of those are indicative of a very unhealthy relationship. It's not about the t-shirt anymore. It's about how we're interacting with each other. And that overshadows way more targets and goals than trains on t-shirts. So the second study that we did really focused on whether we're training these skills. And one of the things that we did was kind of looked at the training that's available in graduate programs in behavior analysis. This article by Pastrana et al., there was not a single frequently assigned reading and behavior analysis that focused on therapeutic relationships and interpersonal professional skills of any sort. So we're not assigning the readings, but there might be other ways that people are being trained. So in this next study, in fact, it was BCBAs that we trained about that we surveyed about their training experiences in the field. We got about 200 and a bit respondents. So again, there are clearly way more than that in terms of BCBAs. But of the ones who responded, we did have a very nice distribution from people new to the field to 20 years plus, including a few BCABAs, great number of BCBAs, and even some BCBADs. 82% said that they either sometimes or often felt unprepared to deal with expressions of emotions from parents. That's the vast majority of people out there at least once feeling like, I wish I had some other strategies. And most of them indicated they'd never had formal training in these skills in either didactic classes or practicum. Half said that they had had some supervision and mentoring on this in their applied experiences or mentored experiences. 94% of people said they have colleagues that struggle with these skills. So 82% are saying at least once I've struggled with it. 94% have said I see colleagues struggle with this. So this is something that you're not just going to get great at on the fly. Someone has to be contextualizing your everyday actions as a provider as related to these skills in relationships. And, that is a critical part, I think, of what we need to be training our newest BCBAs. That's when you're most likely to get in a pickle, so to speak, about this stuff. Here's a quote from a survey respondent. Emotional detachment is actually promoted in graduate training to prevent individuals from crossing professional and personal boundaries. So the notion is like when, don't have dual relationships is kind of presented as avoid relationships altogether. But, in doing in-home care for years at a time, you are involved in a lot of aspects of that family's life. You see births, deaths, adversity. And this person said, I've seen some peers in the field handle that a little bit robotically and not naturally. We're human beings as well as practitioners of a science. I couldn't agree more with that. I think it is very important to maintain your professional and personal boundaries. But these kinds of relationships, they are professional relationships. just like supervisory relationships or professional relationships. So we shouldn't relegate the word relationship to the personal domain. You have, I hope, a relationship with your manager, with peer colleagues, with your former graduate school mentor. These are professional relationships that need to be nurtured, and that if they are healthy, they will improve your life and your skills. And if they're unhealthy, they will drive up your career dissatisfaction and stress. So I think, this survey hit me hard and it hit Bridget hard. And, it certainly confirmed what we already thought, that people are not getting this training. But it also really confirmed for us, I'm not sure who's going to do this if we don't. Maybe people are going to suddenly come up with these robust courses, but maybe they won't. And if they don't, we are leaving an identified problem unsolved. And that's really, I think, part of what led us to, in that first article, lay out a curriculum. Our first thought was, let's let other people do it, but we'll give them a starter on how. Here's a curriculum, and here are target skills, and here's how you would sample it and some strategies for teaching it. So I'll go through that with you. But I will say that over time, we got worried that that's too effortful and that we maybe needed to make this ourselves and at least make it available to people if they have not already created these resources themselves. So in this curriculum that we propose and in the materials that we are building, perspective taking skills are key. And perspective taking is really core to what we do, because as behavior analysts, we should assume that the other person's circumstances, that is their environment, are not fully known to us, but their behavior is understandable and predictable given their environment. And when seen from their perspective and in the context of their immediate controlling variables, however they behave makes perfect sense, because all behavior is a product of that person by environment interaction. So perspective taking should be absolutely consistent with that. If I don't understand their behavior, it's because I have not fully tried to explore how their environment is impacting their behavior. Because if I did explore it, it would make perfect sense. I think the other thing is this, and these are quotes from the book on supervision, where we try to outline how to teach these skills to your supervisee. The people who are going to struggle most with perspective taking in their behavior analytic work every day are people who are somewhat rigid or invested in being right. I'm not saying being wrong is good, but being right should not necessarily be your goal. In interpersonal situations, it should never be your goal. Being effective should be your goal. If you focus on being effective, the being right comes along with it. And you often get to a situation where everyone can be right and everyone can use their unique knowledge and skill sets to create an intervention situation that is highly effective. But if someone, particularly if they may be a little bit insecure about things or new to the field, if they think being right, getting that parent to agree that I'm right, getting that parent to do what I am wanting them to do, my treatment, clearly suggests it's not our treatment. So, perspective taking really is about that ability to recognize that what someone else sees, thinks, feels, knows can be very different from what you are seeing, thinking, feeling, and knowing at that time. And that you have to predict that other people are going to respond to the world around them based on their perspective, not based on yours. And that notion shows up in so many ways. For example, if I don't pay attention to the fact that you don't know these wacky science behavior analysis words and I use jargon with you, I'm suddenly throwing in a foreign language. And I wouldn't suddenly, if we're speaking in French, I wouldn't suddenly throw in Japanese and expect that to work. But that notion of perspective taking and thinking about, well, what does the listener see, think, feel, know? What are they hearing and how is that going to land? Allows me to predict whether I'm likely to have a positive effect on them or not, and whether we are likely to be able to move forward in a positive way. So when we extend that idea of perspective taking to the family's perspective, this, I think, is a big part of what we're missing in behavior analysis. If we haven't contextualized it as it is the family, not the child, that is your client. That child happens to be part of the family, but you have to think about the family as your client and have some understanding and empathy for their experiences. And then if that understanding and empathy leads you to recognize that your behavior might have a negative impact rather than a positive one, the compassionate care part is changing your behavior based on that understanding and the desire to alleviate distress. So let me walk you through a perspective taking and empathy exercise. And to be honest with you, this is a perspective taking and empathy exercise for both families and providers. We're kind of talking about this from the provider perspective and the need to take the family's point of view. But you also have to keep in mind, families often don't understand or appreciate or have perspective taking for the provider point of view. So from the family's perspective, their child is the most important person in the world. And that's absolutely true. May also be that their other children need me too, or that they need an hour to themselves, or their head is going to explode. So when a behavior analyst thinks like, okay, well, I'm here for the session, I want to interact with this mom, but she's changing the baby and, doing something with a 3-year-old and, just like went away for 15 minutes, the provider might not fully appreciate that these really true statements are what's controlling that behavior. The family may think that their child needs to participate in a bunch of different therapies, and ABA sessions are just one of them, and they should be scheduled around these other services. And a family is likely to feel like they don't want to see their child struggle and get upset in sessions. They want to make them feel better right now. I totally understand that. I always wanted to make my unhappy child, I wanted to make it better for my child, and I still do, even though he's in college. But there's this provider perspective that is simultaneous, but perceived by the other party in the relationship, and equally true, that the provider may view it as your child is important, but is only one of my many cases. And I can't neglect those other cases in favor of one child, even if I like them the best. And that your child's getting the best services we can provide under the existing circumstances, but hiring and training and maintaining in a field where we are dramatically undermanned We're getting better at this, but we need double what we have of everyone in order to really be able to have, well, number one, RBTs and BCBAs that aren't brand new as the majority of our workforce, but just enough people of any rank and level of experience that BCBA is likely to know about the literature that says, actually, all of that, kind of multifaceted, a little bit of this, a little bit of that with some ABA in there is the control condition in most of our studies where we develop the evidence base for ABA. So they know that approach does not produce great outcomes and it might actually slow the child's progress. But the parent doesn't know that. And they may also have that perspective that we need to push your child a bit to best facilitate his or her progress, and that we will be able to get through it, and that the more the child learns, the more exciting learning will be. But it's not just knowing the other perspective. It's about being able to see both sides simultaneously. When we can only see our own perspective, we end up like this image on the right where, let's say it's the family that's saying, it's deep, it's too much, it's too hard, I can't do this. And the BCBA saying, no, it's not. It's just 15 minutes twice a day. It's not deep at all. If you don't have to forego your own perspective in order to see someone else's perspective. But if you can see both reasonable sides, it may change how you communicate, how you problem solve, how you make decisions, how you interact with the family. It may lead you to ask questions. So tell me a little bit about what's the hardest part, and let's work together to make that hardest part easier. And let's take a look at, okay, if 15 minutes twice a day seems like a lot, let's see how we can make it easier. And also if maybe we could brainstorm about timing it a little differently so that it does not feel, so that it is not as hard as you're experiencing it right now. So it's not about changing your mind or their mind. It's about being able to see both sides and facilitate discussion that is informed by both sides. Taking that action, having that different conversation, engaging in that collaborative decision-making, that's compassion. That's when you recognize that suffering in a non-judgmental way. You are stressed. This is hard. And it's not wrong to perceive something as hard. This is how you're perceiving it. And maybe we've got to work on strengthening some other aspects of your life, more energy, more resources before we start giving you tasks to do. Understanding the universality of suffering in human experience is the key to this. You do not have to have experienced the same suffering in order to understand that someone suffers and care about that. And you don't have to have children of your own in order to understand that it can be exhausting and you can have elevated levels of worry for your children, because you've likely seen your parents experience some of that. You've likely had a significant other or nieces and nephews, and you worried about them, and you found it exhausting even when you took them for the weekend so that whatever your sibling and their partner could just have a great weekend. So you don't have to have had the same experience in order to be moved by the experience and to understand that those experiences may make seemingly reasonable expectations somewhat unreasonable. So that, younger BCBA with no kids probably would not have been perceived that way if behavior and language and decisions had been different and had been based on communicating and understanding and an experience of being moved by that other person's suffering. Just acknowledging what a family is experiencing and connecting with their distress, whether you have your own children or not, is what creates that perception of understanding. It can be described as you don't have kids, you don't understand, but really what the parent is saying is, when you behave this way, it makes me feel like you don't understand. They're just not saying it in that way. And a lot of times, in order to be moved by a family's experience, being moved is some heavy stuff. It means that we have to be able to tolerate some of those uncomfortable feelings, to acknowledge that maybe we feel a little bit of fear that this child, although making progress, is not making progress like we wish they did. We may feel some distress thinking about what it's like to not sleep multiple nights in a week because, the child's not sleeping, the family doesn't sleep. In order to be good at this, you have to be open to experiencing this, and you have to be skilled at not letting it overwhelm you. It's that fine line between I see it, I recognize it, I understand it, I'm moved by it, but I don't take it on as my own burden. I just behave to help lift your burden, which is a different thing. And if you are not taught how to do this, you're not likely to be great at it. So we do propose this curriculum in the paper, and it focuses on, in each of these core skills of social interactions, perspective taking, and empathy, the skills that you would teach, the skills to monitor, the different kinds of activities to do. And we've begun to create these things in the master's program through FIT. And then we'll be creating even more advanced instruction for CE. But there are ways to do this. There are resources out there for each of these components. And, these are things that it makes great sense. No one's going to disagree that smiling and eye contact and greetings are important. It's just that we might forget to do them, where we're not thinking about this as our primary means of making positive change for a child, providing realistic, hopeful comments about the child, and making positive comments about the parents' behavior, asking the parents if they're happy with how things are going, using humor. All of those things are just great everyday social interaction strategies that strengthen the relationship. Things like empathy, making eye contact, paying attention to body posture, leaning forward versus leaning back, your facial expression, nodding. If you're not taught to pay attention to these things, you are unlikely to do so while you're paying attention to the things that you have been taught, like data or describing a graph or implementing BST. But these are relatively straightforward things to teach as long as we pay attention to teaching them. And similarly with compassion, things like pausing, allowing parents to describe what they feel and confirming that in non-judgmental ways, providing support and acknowledging that things must be hard to experience every day. those things that demonstrate your understanding of what it's like for the parent, even if you are not a parent, they strengthen the relationship and they give you that opportunity to collaborate, seeking parents' ideas, providing explanations, and involving them in choices. Of course, the choices are going to be among evidence-based treatments, but still, among evidence-based treatments, it is absolutely reasonable to have input on a selection basis of the people that are going to have to actually do the work. Compromising, apologizing, acknowledging mistakes in a humble way. Those are things that can actually be taught, and you can teach people to avoid those authoritarian strategies where they're being a little too directive in favor of authoritative ones. Here's what I know and what I think would be useful in this situation. Is there anything about that concerns you? And let's talk it through. That's a more authoritative approach. Avoiding, defensiveness will drive wedges in relationships. You don't have to be perfect, and it's okay to be told that you made a mistake, because now you have an opportunity to make it better. As hard as I try, I'm terrible at interrupting. I have to actively keep myself from even jumping in when I hear a great idea. I don't want to jump in too quickly. I want to let that person get the great idea out. We can go awry when we focus too much on the negative or jump to solutions too soon. When we take that opportunity to build solutions together, we end up with better solutions. And of course, passing the buck. Oh, I'm sorry, I can't do that. My supervisor isn't going to allow that. Doesn't really strengthen the understanding of the family. Okay, I want to leave time for questions. So I am going to just show you a quick example. This is from the medical community, but there are stimuli out there that you can use to teach these kinds of skills, and you can do it using VST. Okay, so we have some upcoming resources. We are working on a multi-part workshop. And it should be available later this year through ABA Technologies for CEUs. And I would say back half of the year is when we would target that. And then we already have built a course for people who are getting their BCBAs, who are attending FIT's new online master's program. Let me just say one quick thing about supervision, and then we'll focus on questions. When you are supervising someone and teaching them this, yes, maybe you're going to have them do this workshop or what have you, but there are ongoing questions that you could ask your supervisee that may change what they think about. If you ask them questions like, how are you and the family interacting? It may give them insight that they need to actually reflect on that. Or what's the tone of your conversations? It may lead them to notice even that some things aren't going great yet. This is the kind of thing you could have on your agenda for supervision as a standing item. Asking, what are your goals for this therapeutic relationship with the family, may highlight for them that they weren't even thinking about a therapeutic relationship with the family, much less having goals for it. So starting with getting the conversation going changes their perspective, even if they have not yet had any of this other material. One last resource, if you're looking for one, I mentioned this new supervision book. It's at Sloan Publishing. Chapter 9 focuses specifically on how to teach and assess these interpersonal and therapeutic relationship skills. So, we're getting to the point where we really do have some resources for how you could self-evaluate, how you could monitor, how you could teach your supervisees what to pay attention to. Simple things like monitoring your language, that words like parent training rather than parent engagement suggest you're teaching the parent rather than also paying attention to what they're teaching you. Thinking about it as one of my clients or one of my families places the ownership with you. It's their family, right? If you're talking about compliance and treatment integrity a lot, or my goals, that may be a red flag to you that you're not fully embracing this idea of a collaborative partnership, of we're in this together and this family is my best opportunity. My goal is to give them a better life, and they are my best resource for building that life, and they will be around when I am long gone. So I want them to feel strong and capable. So this is a quote just pretty much from me. The hair raises on the back of my neck when I hear someone talking about the goal being to get the family to do what we want. That's not really ever should be our goal. We should be figuring out what the family wants and how to help them get that. So just as a reminder, Kate Fisk also has this great book on autism in the family. And we are getting to the point where we actually have some great resources on cultural competency. So I'm going to stop sharing there and let's go to the questions. It looks like we had some good ones in there. Let's see. When services create more stress, the question becomes, is it helping the family more than hurting? I agree. It absolutely can be. With regard to perspective taking, I wonder your thoughts on acknowledging that I can't possibly understand what it's like to be the person because I do not share their experiences, and coming from that place of curiosity. So asking, listening, and validating experience and perspectives that different from our own versus I understand. Yeah, I don't actually object to the phrase, I understand. I think I am more likely to use the phrase, I can't fully understand, but I appreciate that it must be hard. Yes, we don't understand other people's lived experiences. We can't possibly, but we can't ever give up. So I'm always afraid that when we take too hard a stance on the you can't understand, that it might punishes people's attempts to understand. And so I think that when you build a strong relationship, if you ever mistakenly say I understand too quickly, people will forgive you for that. But coming from that place of curiosity is exactly right. The only way that I can begin to understand is by you telling me about it. And the more that I hear the stories of families and the different experiences, the more likely I am to understand it, even though I don't exactly share it. And so for me, when you are capable at perspective taking, you can begin to understand. You do not master. You will never have had that shared experience, but you can develop that appreciation for what people see, think, know, hear differently. You can predict how they respond, and you can predict how different circumstances must have a very hard impact on them. So I realize that I am not fully in sync with a lot of people's, dislike for the phrase I understand. I think it gives us such a prompt, a self prompt for perspective taking that's valuable. You just have to realize that when you say, I understand some things, you don't understand everything. And any way you get to understanding is by people sharing their experiences from you and being humble and curious. Those two things going together. All right, how would you modify this style of parent communication when the client is an adult and they have goals of independence and self-determination. Well, I think that the way I would modify it is I would not only ask the family may not be your client when you have an adult client. It may be only the adult. They may be completely independent. There may also be a family in there. And so I think to the extent that you can, it is that adult that you are having these conversations about in terms of what are your goals? What are you worried about? What are you excited about? And when they have limited language skills, you may bring in the family as part of their voice and their story, but it is still about learning what you don't know and how it makes, how it makes a difference to everything you think, right? What you don't know could dramatically alter what you think about. And the hard part is you don't know about it. So just as a go-to, ask questions and listen. Curious what your thoughts are on maintaining client dignity when families discuss struggles related to their own relationship with their child's. So asking to step away from the client or holding support meetings without the client present. Absolutely, I think it is important, and you may not get paid for it. And I'm not saying that doesn't matter, but it is important for families to have that opportunity to share what hurts. And suddenly having a life that's different than you expected, unless you just won 10 million in the lottery, the difference is often in a direction that you didn't expect. And yes, and families can be so overwhelmed by that they don't recognize that the child may be able to hear, so yes, it is up to us to say, let me create an opportunity for you and I to talk about this, just one-on-one, and connect them to other resources to acknowledge that they likely cry every day or every week for an imagined future that may never have happened, but they thought it would. That's a lot of what having a new child is. Okay, we have another question, and I think we're already over time. I'm so sorry. What recommendations do you have for assessing skills organization-wide? Should it involve competency assessment? Absolutely. I think that, assessing those kinds of therapeutic relationship evaluations, they're in the book, but they could be adopted organization-wide. They could be adopted by specific supervisor. I think that's a great system to build. Okay, here's one. How do you balance perspective taking with positive client outcome when the family is placing priority on interpersonal versus treatment efficacy? Is unable to follow through with recommended treatments in exchange for that positive. Well, I guess I would say this. I never want families to have to pick between those two. And I think that when they do, we've done them a disservice. We should strive for effective treatment to also be couched in fantastic interpersonal skills. And we should be putting as much effort into teaching those interpersonal skills as we are the treatment skills. Okie doke. That's the end of our questions. I'm sorry we ran over, but it was wonderful to be here with you all. And I guess you can tell from how much I said that this is one of my favorite topics. So
thank you so much for your time, Dr. LeBlanc. The Q&A was an added bonus for everyone today. We were not expecting that, but we very much appreciate it. We hope everyone found this morning's presentation informative and inspiring. Thank you so much again for joining us, and this concludes our event.
Thank you, everyone. Have a wonderful weekend and keep doing all the great work that you do with families. Bye.